Hi guys, welcome to another Learning Electronics Repair video. So today I thought there was far too much stuff in the workshop. I need to clear some stuff out to make space for other stuff. These are old motherboards, socket 775, which are faulty, have problems such as North Bridge and similar things that basically makes them not really worth fixing. I have a few of those. I think this one's actually, yeah, it's another 775. So I have a lot of boards like these, and I have like a scrap ATX power supply, some other power supply out of a Humax satellite receiver, which may or may not actually work. And you can see a variety of things here. So when I have a clear out like this, I basically do something that we all did, certainly back in the 70s, and I suspect before then, yeah, and after, which is to salvage parts off the circuit boards, keep the parts we want, and then throw the rest away. So that's what I'm going to do today, and I thought we'd have just a quick look at what's, in my opinion, is worth salvaging, the stuff that I do salvage, and how I store it after I've salvaged, because I think it's both things are important. One is really knowing what's worth having, and two is keeping that stuff in a way in which you can actually find what you want when you want, otherwise it's a bit pointless. So the disadvantage really of doing this is that it's a bit time consuming, but if you've got an hour or two to kill sometimes, or an hour at the end of the day, you can just, if you want, do a bit of this sort of salvaging. Personally, I find it quite therapeutic actually. Once I get started, I find it a bit hard to stop, yeah. But I guess that all depends on the individual, I won't say attitude, but just the way our brains are wired up basically, yeah. But certainly back in the day, a lot of people were salvaging components, and probably a lot of that's because they were hard to get or expensive to get. We didn't have the internet and such like. You'd probably have to buy electronics magazines and find adverts in them, and then order what you want, post a check because we didn't have credit cards then, and wait while it arrived and the check cleared and they post it back, and you know, a couple of weeks later you probably got your bits of stuff with a credit note for the stuff they didn't have. So that's why I think a lot of us salvage stuff back in the day, and also just because it's fun, and you know, you can use these bits for making interesting projects or for repair work. So I kind of do this two ways really. I have in particular graphics cards, which I tend to keep the scrap ones complete, because normally if I'm taking a part off a graphics card, it's for another graphics card of the same sort, and I find in those cases, and I suspect probably games consoles are similar area, that it's probably worth keeping the thing complete and just taking parts off as you need. Often because small surface mount components may not be marked, or chips are marked with SMD codes you can't easily identify, and it's the easiest way. So just take off another board. Plus GPUs tend to be fairly small. I mean, okay, some of them are chunky, but they're not huge things, and you can keep them, you know, well organized, so you know which one's in which box. So that's what I do with that. But for this stuff, it hangs around until I get fed up of seeing it and decide to have a big clear out day, and then I start stripping parts. So let's have a look to see what we might have. I'll move some of the stuff out of the way. We'll start with a motherboard, for instance, and a couple of other examples, and we'll have a look to see what's worth us having. So one of the first things I find very useful to salvage is heat sinks. Yeah, heat sinks off anything really. Always useful to have. You can have a nice box full of heat sinks. Not so much because you'll find faulty ones that you need to replace on items, more that they're just useful for projects or when you're working on things and you just want to rest a heatsink on top to keep it cool. So heat sinks are one of the first things I would definitely have. This board is one with an embedded CPU. Either the CPU or the PCH is faulty. I think it was the PCH was getting very hot. So I've probably already taken a few things off this already. So let's have a look to see what I would salvage from this board, and then let's see how we're going to remove some of these parts, hopefully without damaging them. The first thing I find useful is connectors. So I always try and take connectors off boards, especially HDMI connectors in particular. Not so much these sort, but if they come off I will certainly have them. Phono connectors, jack sockets, definitely worth having because these things do break. So the connectors would be something useful. These little polymer capacitors I normally tend to have because they are very common values you find on motherboards. They're easy to test with a capacitance meter, ESR meter, so you know if they're good or not. So capacitors I would definitely take off. SIOs normally, yes, because they're easy to get off, and probably the audio chip because it's easy to get off. Those are things I will have. Any of the MOSFETs are going to come off, so there's MOSFETs down here, definitely worth having, and without a doubt inductors. Inductors are quite hard to get, and they're also one of the more expensive components to buy as well, so inductors for sure I will have. What I won't take from the board is things like the little surface mount components, because basically you'd have to measure them to work out the value to store them. They're easy to buy whole packs of various surface mount resistors, capacitors in different sizes, which is what I've done from AliExpress. They're cheap to buy a whole pack, and then they're pretty well organised for you as well. So that's basically what I would have for me. If I can get the battery holder off in one go, I will. They do break. Some of the things, PCI slots and such like, they're very difficult to unsolder. But certainly boards like this are very good for practicing your desoldering skills, like can you remove the north bridge or PCH without damaging the board? Can you remove the embedded CPU without damaging the board? So if you're fairly new to electronics and surface mount, these are very good practice boards as well. So they have more than one reason to make this worthwhile. So let's start with this one. How would I go about it first? Well, the first thing I normally remove is the capacitors, if I want the capacitors, because when you get it hot, it's possible these one or more may explode. They cause a lot of mess, they don't smell very nice, so quite often I will take the capacitors off first. The only case other than that is if I want some of the connectors and there's capacitors nearby and I want to avoid damaging the connectors. So if I wanted like these, I would tend to take them off first. But pin headers I don't bother with because you can easily buy them or easily get them. Things like SATA connectors I'll certainly get if I can take them off, but I'm not going to worry too much if it dies. There's lots of transistors here we'll have as well. So with this one I'm going to start by removing the capacitors because they appear to be through hole ones, which makes it fairly easy to remove them without damaging the plastic connectors that I may also want. So the capacitors, how do I get them off the board? I use two methods really. One is to use a soldering iron, a nice chunky tip from the other side, and literally pull them out. And the other option is to use hot air from the other side and literally pull them out. But first of all, let's try with the soldering iron to see if these will come off the board easily. Okay, the easiest way to remove the capacitors, in my opinion, is this one. We use leaded solder. A nice chunky tip. This is a BC3 tip. I have my soldering iron set at 380. Don't put flux on the board. If you put flux on the board, it may make it easier to unsolder things. But remember, we're not really worried about damaging the board, and it'll make a lot more smoke if you use flux. This can get quite smoky anyway, so it's best not to add flux and make it worse. There's obviously some flux on this board already. I don't use a fume extractor, but when I'm doing this sort of work, I like to blow the fumes away from me. So what I use is this. This is a CPU fan with a shroud on. It came from a scrap computer or one I stripped for parts. So if I place this to one side and just effectively blow the smoke away from me, that will stop any real problems with the fumes. Now we need something to put all our parts in when we've salvaged them. I find if you keep stuff a little bit organised to start with, it makes life easier. So I use little plastic trays like these. Now these are plastic, so they will melt a little bit if you throw hot components in them. So I tend to put the components on one side a little bit to let them cool down and then sort of put them all in. So I have one for capacitors, one for inductors and so on, one for MOSFETs, and probably have another one for the little transistors and so on. So I keep it kind of not sorted out, but the same sort of things together. The other things I look for, I'll just mention, although I don't bother with the little surface mount capacitors and resistors, any of the bigger ones I do. So things like these are actually inductors marked LB, the inductor beads, definitely worth having. And these type of resistors, which are like the low value large ones, and for that matter any fuses I see that are soldered to the board have got to be worth having. LDOs definitely. So let's begin with this one, as I was going to do. Whether you can do this with your fingers will depend on how fast they heat up, basically. It might be worth using a cloth. I mean, you could use some sort of gloves. I don't like gloves basically, so I tend to use my fingers or a cloth. So we'll go to the capacitors we're interested in. I'll try to get one nice big blob of solder which will go across both legs. Get hold of the capacitor with my fingers, and if I'm quick enough I can pull it out. If it gets too hot, this is when I have to use a cloth. See, that one came out quite easily. Took a second or two, and we have one tub for capacitors. This one's a little one, much flatter against the board. That's probably going to be a bit more difficult to do that way. So what I may be able to do is just wedge something down the side of it. If not, we'll use a cloth. So again, both pins together, blob of solder. I may even be able to push it through the board actually. Yeah, you see how I pushed down on it and it flirted out? So that's another one out. We can try that technique a bit more actually. Let's go to another one. Here. Good blob of solder. Both legs. Sideways to melt it and then coming from the top. Okay, that one didn't want to do it. Looks like I just got lucky with that first one, yeah. Yeah, that one came out, you heard it go, yeah. So one is out and one is almost out in the same tub. This is probably going to be too hot to touch now. Tweezers, a little tool, something just to pull it out with. Always wait for it to cool down a moment. Let's see. Yeah, it's out. So I have one tub basically starting with capacitors in, one with larger transistors in, and we can carry on across the board. So I'll keep on like that now. I'll get the rest of them off and then we can go on to something else. I have most of them out. These down here, which are a bit awkward to get at, there's 3 left, are coming out very well by using the technique of a blob on top, heating them, then they're just falling out of the board, yeah? If you can hear them. Yep. So all those 3 actually just fell directly out of the board. So next thing I'm interested in probably is the connectors. I'd like to take these off because I do come across broken ones sometimes. That one if I can, and certainly the HDMI. Maybe that thing, maybe not. So the way I get the connectors off normally is to hold the board in a vise, heat it from behind and pull them out. I'll try and set the camera up in such a way as you can see me doing that. Here we have a small bench vise. It's only a little one. It's ideal for this sort of work. So we'll take our PCB and just clamp it in the vise. Because I'm not worried about particularly damaging the PCB, I don't really mind how I do it. So we can probably just clamp it directly across the RAM slots and just hold it still. I can now fairly easily get to the back of here. So this is how I actually go about removing these. I'll just move it a little bit, get a bit of focus, you can see it hopefully, and now let's do it. So I use hot air and a pair of needle nose pliers, and I just keep, because I'm wearing my shorts as always in the workshop, keep my legs out of the way so I don't get solder dripping onto me, yeah, because it's not nice. And you would hear me scream, yeah. So let's have a go. So hot air's on 450 maximum airflow. You can see it if you haven't seen it. There's my quick 861 DW. Yeah. Unusual view of my workbench. Left-handed, so I have my right hand 3. And I'm going to go for the HDMI first. Now, I'll angle the heat downwards a little bit so it's not effectively blowing on my hand when I'm here, yeah. We can heat it up. And I should hopefully just be able to grab hold of it and pull it out. You will not salvage everything without damaging it. I mean, that's just the way it is, yeah? Let's see if we can get this off. No flux, it'll just make it more smelly and hot, smoky. Okay. Still not wanting to give it up yet. See, it's taking quite a bit of heat. Coming. Okay, it's out. We'll check it in a little bit. Can we have this next one? I'm not sure what it is, but why not? I haven't got one of these, whatever it is, so let's have one if I can. You'll find once you've got one thing out, the whole area will be warm. It won't take so long to remove the other ones. So this is coming, whatever it is. I'll have to maybe just get in that way. Get a grip, yeah, whatever it is, I've got it. Let's see if we can remove these. This will be a good challenge. Can we remove the serial port and the VGA port? No, that was not coming easily. There is a way, if you really wanted it, was me to flood all the pins with leaded solder first and then try and remove it. But I'm kind of like not totally bothered if it comes off or not. I'll continue this way. It's actually coming loose. I can heat cooking. Coming. I think it's coming. It's out. We'll check it. So we have the other one. The 9-pin serial connector. Well, that's going to come anyway, easily. And seeing as the board is so hot, and I take a cloth or something, I can probably get hold of this. I can't easily get hold of it with the pliers. Let's see if we can get this off. So this is the PS2 connectors. I don't have one of these. You never know when one might be useful, I guess. Use the cloth to hold this one if we can. There's no easy way to grip this one in pliers. It's off, but it melted by the looks of it. So we can get the 4-way ATX off as well while we're here. This is coming. One side's loose. Yep. That was a bit warm even with the cloth. Well, there's a few more connectors, so seeing as it's going so well, shall we see if we can have them? I'd like this one. Off. Go on, let's see if we can get the USB and LAN ports up. It's one of them. Coming. off. Should we take the last one? Okay, we have quite a nice little stash of connectors here by the looks of it. So this one, whatever it is external SATA or something like that, came off cleanly, so I hadn't got any of these, keep that. The first one I took off, the HDMI, came off perfectly cleanly, perfectly usable. The 4-way ATX connector, perfectly usable. Same with the 9-pin male D connector, serial port. Got to have that. This is the VGA connector. Again, came off perfectly usable. This is the PS2. It looks like it's melted in here, but I think it's just a bit underneath. I've got a feeling it's actually okay. And you can probably just scrape away this melty plastic here. I'm pretty confident we could actually use that, so we'll keep it. Those are still a bit hot. This is the jack connector. We just slightly damaged the pink one, but it's definitely usable. And these are much easier to solder back on than they are to take off, by the way, so we'll have that. These are still too hot to pick up, so we'll use the cloth. Still very warm, yeah, this thing, still very warm. So again, it came off. You can't see it with the reflection of that, I think. Yeah, I can handle it now. Came off nicely, no damage. Yeah, that's perfectly good. And the last one, the same, perfectly good. Could be useful for something. So that's quite a lot of nice connectors off the board. The only ones I didn't get was the SATA connectors, so that's the next thing. These are basically best done the same way, with the board clamped into the bench vise. So we'll do the same on these. Let's see if we can get them out. I'll use the long nose pliers on these, do over this side. A shame I can't guess where you can really see it. Let me see. No, it will not turn around far enough, guys, unfortunately. So that's the best you're going to get, I'm afraid. Right, wood's still quite warm in some areas, so hopefully this won't take too long. The first one's just loose, so what just come out. These can be quite difficult because quite often the pins come out through the plastic, but let's see. Again, this one's moving. It's out. Last one. moving, it's out. And while we're at it, let's have a CMOS battery holder as well. See if we can get it. There's 2 pins here and here. Not wanting to give it up easily. I'm sure it will with a bit of heat. One end's out. Both ends out. Okay, let's see what we've got there. Are they usable? Well, let's see. First SATA connector, not melted. All the pins are there. That's a good one. Another one, not melted. All the pins there. That's a good one. Once more with this one. That's a good one. And the CMOS battery holder still a little bit warm, but you can see it's not melted. That's a good one. So that's all the connectors off the board. So that's all the hard work done really. Now let's have a look what else we can get. We could try to take this off just for the fun of it, not as I think we really want it or there's any use for anything, but it's a nice bit of practice to see if we can actually remove this with just the hot air. So in this case I will put a bit of flux on the board. I'll take the preheater as well. Now let's see, we've tried this before. Let's see with the quick plus the preheater, can we actually remove something like this without damaging the board? So I put flux around it. I'll just warm it up a little bit and let it run underneath. Board's still a bit warm, see that went under. Yeah. There's lots of flux running around the board. Okay. Let's try it. Let's see if we can get it off. As I say, not that I want it, just another good thing about salvaging these sort of boards is practicing your soldering skills. There's the board on the preheater. I've just wedged this under it to keep it flat. I'm not going to bother with the temperature meter. I just want to see how easily we can do this. Put the heating on, so it's actually on now. It was on just blowing before. So let's let it warm up a little bit. In fact, while we're at it, let's use that temperature meter here. See if it's actually... Can you see it? I have one of these to review actually. I'll do that next week. I'll turn the heating up some more. Like to get this to about 100 degrees or so. 120, something like that. Okay. Well, you can see it's not particularly evenly heated. You see this side's quite a bit cooler. It moves a little bit. This is the problem really when you're trying to remove stuff like this, is getting the temperature even. Can you see the difference from there? Yeah? Quite a lot. Okay. Let's see if we can do it regardless. So I'll get the tweezers. We'll get some hot air. And there's no better way than this to practice. Absolutely no better way to practice your soldering skills, because you can also try sticking things back on the board as well. Yeah, if you want to practice, this is the way to do it. Take stuff off, put stuff on. Not that you're bothered about it working, because I'm assuming it didn't work to start with, but just as a way to really show how well you are soldering. Yeah, and you will learn. You will learn. I'm just going to touch that. Nothing's happening. I want to basically wait until it starts to move. I raised up a little bit just to spread the heat out and not so localized hot. Not moving yet. Still not moving. Now it's starting to move. Do you see it? Yeah, can you see that moving a little bit? And kind of bouncing back again. This is a good way to practice this as well. So this should now come off. Okay. Heater off, now blowing cold. Well guys, that was pretty successful. Yeah, it's a good way to practice. While we've got the board hot, let's start removing some of the MOSFETs and things. I'll take it off the preheater to do this. The fact it's nice and warm will just help us get in MOSFETs and stuff off this. So here we go. This is an easy part of the job, salvaging MOSFETs. I'm not bothered about the RAM slots, I didn't want them, they're not really easy to remove anyway. So I'm just going to take anything off that looks like a chip or a MOSFET from down here. And the inductors, I think we'll have to do the inductors from the other side of the board. Not yet. No, that flirted off, but it didn't go far. Yep. You see now, everything's unsoldering basically. Yeah, because I've got the board hot, so I can easily go around now and just take off things that we want. It's actually more awkward doing this at an angle where you can see what I'm doing. Yeah. I'll just place them on the metal tray. Actually, I did it without melting the RAM slots particularly. Let's have some of these little transistors. Yeah. This I'll do from the other side. Try to get this little 3-pin device here, either a MOSFET, power MOSFET or a voltage regulator. I don't tend to bother with these chips because they tend to be a bit specialised to the one board. But if you want them, you can have them. These sort of things I tend to have. That can go out of the way. Yeah. Crystals are easy to remove, but they're the same on all motherboards. So once you've got a few of them, you've probably got all of them. So I don't bother now. I've got quite a box full of them. Once you get a whole row, they'll just pop off easily one after another. Desoldering the inductors is much like getting the connectors, but a lot easier. So if they surface mount, they're easy to get from the component side. Well, these are through hole, so again we have to hit them from the rear. And I'm going to use a cloth. It's a bit hard to grip them with pliers, at least with a long nose. Maybe with normal size, normal pliers. With the square jaws you might do it, but let's see. I'll just fold the cloth double a couple of times, it shouldn't burn me. Let's just get these out. still not hot enough yet. This takes quite a lot of heat. What I've just seen is actually move. That's one. It's actually kind of like dropped with its own weight as the solder melted. This one's going to go. Yeah, it's come loose on one end. That's the second one. And the third one is somewhere else. Yeah, third one's at the other end of the board actually. By the RAM. This would have been the RAM phase. So once again, same thing. So we have from that motherboard some things, some inductors, some inductor beads. This is all inductors. These are all ICs basically. Surface mount MOSFETs. This is where I put the large resistors. I only found one on that. Through-hole MOSFETs, transistors, capacitors and connectors. So they kind of like organised into bits. So let's put those little boxes on one side and let's look at the next thing we can salvage. So this is fairly typical ATX power supply. It's a scrap one. What would I salvage from this and what would I recommend you to take? Well, personally, I would go for obviously obviously, maybe it's not obvious. I'd take the transistors and MOSFETs, the diodes from this heatsink. I would take the high wattage resistors. You see these chunky resistors? They are always worth having. I'd take the larger capacitors. I wouldn't bother with the small ones myself, but this depends on what you have in your collection and what you want to add to the collection, you know. The large diodes here as well, and there's a few transistors. I always tend to take transistors. I'll take the controller IC. I'm not sure if it's a good one, but I'll certainly have it. These fuses, which have the soldered on wires on the end, are definitely worth having, as are the high voltage capacitors, because sometimes these burn up. And this thing, which you'll always find on these, or normally, this is a thermistor. So this effectively starts off the high resistance and then drops to a low resistance when you first switch on. It's to stop the inrush of current, and these tend to burn up as well, so they're worth having. Another power resistor here will take that off. So that's what we want from this. The small resistors and capacitors I won't bother with. The OptoIsolator I'll definitely take. This will be the TL431, which I will take, but I've got a box full of them, I will say, another transistor. So that's what I would have. The inductors are probably worth having as well. So there's quite a bit of stuff on here we can salvage. These transformers I generally would not bother, but if you don't have one or two, I would take a few and just keep them on one side, because these are useful. Probably not as transformers, because it's usually specific, the winding ratio made for that power supply, but the enamelled copper wire on them is quite useful sometimes. So I'd probably keep at least a couple of these in your box just for the copper wire that's in them. Just before I do this, by the way, this is that processor chip I took off the other motherboard. Just wanted to show you that they come off very cleanly using just the preheater and hot air. So that is the sort of thing I would say. You're probably not going to use things like this, but if you want to practice desoldering these sort of boards are a very, very good way to do it. You'll get a feel for how, you know, when it's liquid, when you can tap it and it moves and this sort of thing. So doing this sort of thing, although the parts are probably of no use to you, without doubt the practice is invaluable. Okay, so with this thing, probably the easiest thing to get off first is a large capacitors. This is much the same as how we were removing the ones from the motherboard, but in a way it's easier because you don't have like through holes on this, so we can normally get away with just putting a little bit of solder on. We don't need any flux to do this, so we just for instance, we can see where a capacitor is here, a little bit of solder on it, and then literally you can grab hold of the capacitor with your fingers. You can focus the camera a bit more. There you go, see a bit clearer here. And then just heat up one end and pull the capacitor towards you. So you can see one end of that is now loose, yeah? I'm now going to heat up the other end and push the capacitor away from me. So I'm going to heat up this end and push on the capacitor. And you see how it just fell off the board, yeah? That really came off easily. So that's the way to desolder these. Again, we'll take the next one. So I've got a finger behind it. I'm going to heat up the leg which is furthest away from me, which is this one. And pull it towards me, yeah? So it's now like so. And then again we can heat up the other leg. And it just came out. I mean, you might want to add a little bit of leaded solder every so often onto your bit. Just makes this a bit easier. But these are coming out very easily. So again, there's another one down here. So finger behind it. We'll find the leg. I think I have the right leg. If you don't have the right leg, it won't move. It's not moving, yeah. I'm thinking it's actually is here. So warm it. Yeah, and it just went. Just came again towards me. Get onto this one. And it just came out. So these are coming off very easily and very quickly. We'll have the other one, the slightly smaller one. Again, you can see where the legs are. One is here. Yeah, and it went that way. Let me hold it like this a little bit for you. One here. Yep, see it come out. And you probably heard a little creak as it came. So we'll have those. While we're at it down here, I'll take these resistors as well. These are useful. Low value, fairly high wattage resistors. They do tend to fail. They're definitely worth having, that's for sure. So again, I can see the end of the resistor. So I'll warm one end up, get hold of the resistor body with my fingers. As long as I'm fairly quick, this will come out before it gets hot. Yeah, you see how it just came out there? I can now get hold of the body. So it's a bit warm. Just go to the other end. Yeah. Come out with quite nice long leads on it. This one out of interest is a brown, black. That's a 1 0 followed by no zeros. That's a 10 ohm. The gold means it's a 5% resistor, so that can go in my little tub of resistors. Oops, and it bounced. Yeah, a little tub with resistors, surface mount and through all. There's another one, again, same sort of value. Definitely worth having. A little bit of solder will help on one end. If it gets too warm, you can either use pliers, but you'll probably damage the resistor, or you can use a cloth. I mean, if you want to, put gloves on, whatever floats your boat, yeah. There is a trick, by the way. If you want to know where the component is, I'll just show you this. This is more useful when you're working on boards that you're bothered about. But if you take a laser pointer, or I've got a little thermometer, IR thermometer with a laser built in, and you put the laser at the board, you can normally see where the other end of the component is. So I put the laser at the end of the resistor, and quite often it will shine through. Depends on the PCB. Yeah, you can see it's shining through here, so you know you're kind of close to it. I don't know if you saw it on camera, not there. Yeah. So a laser pointer can be quite handy. But the other way, rather than visibly, is kind of like if you get your fingers on it and you get your finger the other side, it's very easy normally to feel that your fingers are effectively opposite each other. Much better than using your eyes, actually. So I can see definitely that the resistor is in here somewhere. So we can just try and melt this, get hold of the resistor, just melt this bit, and once I get it, will just come out. Yep. Another one with quite a nice long leg on it. So we've had those. You can see it's taking more time for me to tell you how to do this than it is to actually do it myself. These sort of coils very rarely fail, probably not worth taking off, to be quite honest. Again, unless you want some of the heavy enamel copper wire, you can do it. But we've got those off. So next thing is going to be the diodes. These are always worth having. They fail fairly regularly. They're fairly universal, so quite often you'll find it's easy to substitute one for another. They're normally Schottky diodes, and they're normally dual diodes with common cathodes. So let's have a look. If you're doing this sort of thing, it makes sense to buy a semiconductor analyzer, because the chances are you're taking something apart because it's faulty and you don't exactly know what's wrong with it, so it's not too difficult sometimes to take off a faulty component. But if you get a cheap semiconductor analyzer, that'll pretty much get you away with that. It's worth sometimes, I hear this is in the way, I don't really want the component, so quite often it's worth just cutting the thing off the board so you can get to the stuff that you do want. Yeah. Just to make life easy for yourself. Okay. And I can just effectively just twist this off the board. Okay. It just makes it, well, it should in theory make it easier to get the thing that you do want. In this case it's proven a bit fiddly, but there you go. There. So I say I didn't want this thing anyway, but and that's because I have some of this enamel copper wire anyway, so I can go in the bin. Obviously, if you want it, you desolder it. Yeah. Now we can get quite easily to these three things. We can see what we've got. Often you'll find these little washers behind them. These little rubbery or mica washers. Definitely worth having, because sometimes these get lost or broken or torn. You can just keep them in a box and you've got loads of them then. So those things I would definitely keep hold of. Again, depends on how many you've got. If you've got a huge box full of them already, then you don't need more, yeah? Okay. So, taking these transistors out. The way I tend to do this is much the same as I was just doing with the capacitors. So, in this case, these ones are fairly small. The TO220, as they call it. So it's not too difficult to just warm up all three pins and pull it out of the board. Again, if it gets too hot, you can get hold of it with a pair of pliers or something like that, needle nose pliers. But usually you can just do it, so you just get the thing hot, a quick waggle and it'll come out the board. Yeah, you can see I've pushed it over one way, see what I've done with it. So again, I'll just get these two pins, pull it back the other way. It's obviously this one that's holding it. I've pushed it the other side again, and it's kind of coming out. Yeah, I'm just waiting for this solder to solidify on this leg, and then we'll go back to this side again. And there it is. Yeah, so that's come out quite nicely. You can see it's a diode matrix. If you see the symbol in the middle, it has two diodes, common cathode. Definitely worth having. I'll sling it in the box with the power transistors for now. And we'll go to the next one. Same, exactly same. Good blob of solder across it. Get a hold of the thing with your fingers. Warm it. And yeah, that one came straight out, yeah? Straight out. That'll be another one. Yep, you can see the symbol on it. And then we have this big one. These are a little bit more fiddly because the legs are further apart. But you can usually use the same technique. So, a good blob of solder. We get leaded solder on each pin. Okay. I can get hold of the transistor, and if I warm them fast enough, I should just be able to pull it out. Yeah. You see, I've melted one end, tipped it up, tipped it down. Now I'm going to wait a minute while the other leg solidifies. This one's loose. We'll go again. It's these two. There you go. So you see, just a little bit of manipulation, that's all it took, out it came. Again, if you look at it, can we see the symbol on it? I'll use my torch, I'm sure you can. Now I've probably dazzled you, but this again will be a nice big double diode, high wattage. Let's get into focus. There you can see it now, yeah, you can see the symbol. So it's a double diode, common cathode. Exactly the same as the smaller ones I just took off. Double diode, common cathode. Definitely worth having. So we've had that stuff off it. These large capacitors, to be quite honest, I've got a lot of them. I'm not sure I have any 330 marks, I'll probably take them off. These don't very often fail, to be quite honest. It's unusual for these to actually fail. Very rare you need to replace one. I have seen them where all the guns comes out and the leg rots off. But they're so simple to get, you might as well. At least until you've got what you think is enough in your stash, yeah? I hope they came. Bridge rectifiers, in this case it has 4 separate diodes. And we see another high wattage resistor here. So let's get the resistor, which I think is going to here. Yeah. Yeah. We'll come back to these diodes. There's another resistor here. High wattage resistor again. A little bit of solder. Okay, again it just literally just pulled out, yeah. Other end. What's this one? This is a looks like it might be a 47 ohm. Yellow, violet, black, I think that is. No, it might be grey. Hard to read the first number. Shall we see what it is out of interest? See what it is. I think it might be a 47 ohm. Yeah, how about that? Yellow, violet, black. It's just a bit odd to read. Okay, got to be worth having. So we've had a lot of interesting stuff off here. Now these smaller capacitors I'm not going to bother with. The diode I'm certainly going to have. This one's on quite long legs. It'll be a Schottky diode and probably several amps. So another useful one. It's very thick legs, so I can see it's here and here. So we'll get a bit of leaded solder onto this. Soldering iron wants waking up again. I actually broke the motion sensing little thing inside here. I needed to get another one basically. I dismantled it because the wiring had come off the end of the connector in here and it broke the little thing. Hello? Oh, if there's nobody there, just go away. I hate these bloody spam calls. Driving me nuts at the moment. If I get the phone rings and there's nobody there straight away, I'll just put the phone down on them. If you get like a click or a blip, you know, yeah. They can't even be asked to phone them number yourself rather than use the machine. They don't get my attention, yeah. I'm just removing the fuse while I'm here, so I literally grabbed hold of this end and just pulled this out the board. This end will be pretty hot now. I can just, no, it's not too hot, but you just have to, it's pretty warm. I'll leave that a minute. That end's a bit warm to grip. Okay. So, the big diode. I'll probably use the same sort of technique. The legs are quite long. I'll get hold of the body of the diode. Get the end hot, and yeah, out it came. So that came out again very, very easily. Again, it's a little bit warm now, so we'll go back to the fuse. Okay, fuse is out. These ones are soldered on wires, are really useful. The diode will have cooled down a little bit now, so we can get the other end of the diode, which is here. Yep. Nice diode. I don't have a box of diodes. I'll sling them in the same one as the transistors. Fuses, put them with the resistors. I don't have any more tubs. Yeah. Same with this thermistor. So these are useful things to have. You can just grab hold of it and just pull it out the board. Yeah. I can go in with the resistors. What else do we want from this? Yeah, these ones. So these are a little bit more awkward because the legs are a lot shorter. They get hot very quickly. So normally with these, I'll take one of these type of tools, stick it down behind the leg of the diode at one end, and then literally lever it out of the board. Once I've got one end lifted up on each one, let them cool down a little bit. I can easily do the other ends. So we'll go a little bit of solder. So I'm going to do all four pretty much one after the other. Okay. And then we should literally be able to kind of like get this and kind of like pull this downwards and heat up the one nearest to us, and it should just lever out of the board. Let's have a look. So heat, yeah. So you go click. Again, just get into it again. That one should be out of the board. If not, we just come and have another go. It's not a problem. Get the thing a bit further in. Heat it up. Yeah, that one went, yeah. Click, 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 yeah. So the first one's come out now, second one's coming out. Yeah. You can hear the click each time, yes. So you can see now the first one's out of the board, second one's coming out of the board. And if you like, you can go to the other end now and just do basically the same thing. And that should pretty much fall out. This next one should fall. Yep. Two of them fell out. Third one's coming on this end. Fourth one. Again, if you're not melting the solder, just get off a bit of leaded solder. Okay. Click, click. And the same from this end. Yep, out they came. Okay, so that's those out without burning ourselves, which is good. What have we got left? Well, we've got the chip. We've got a transistor here, a couple more transistors here that we're interested in. We've got the OptoIsolator, the TL431. That's very close to a capacitor, so I'll probably take the capacitor out first. Just make it easy. So here's the capacitor. Again, heat both legs together. Just get all of it with my fingers. Heat. Out it came, yeah. And then we have the TL431 there. Now, these transistors can be a little bit fiddly, and if you're not careful, what you'll do is actually break one or more of the legs off the transistor. So the way I normally do these, I get the pliers and I grip, if we get in down, if you can see it, yeah, it's there. I grip all three legs of the transistor if there's enough space to do so, yeah. So in fact, I get in under here and grab hold of the transistor on all three legs. Now I've done that, I can get a good blob of solder, heat all three legs at once, and it should just come out. If you don't heat all the three legs, you might break one of the legs off. It's a bit of a technique you just have to practice a little bit. So I've got it with the pliers. I can see where all the legs are here. So I can literally just walk the whole lot. And it came out, yeah? That one nice and clean. Another transistor here, might as well have it. So it's, again, same thing. Come in with the pliers underneath it. I can see where it is. I'll get a bit of leaded solder, clean. So the pins are basically here. Three in a line. Again, pliers are in. Warm it up, and out it came, yeah? If you do it this way, they'll come out really quickly, and most likely you won't break them. I mean, if, you know, you're not always going to get everything off one of these things, yeah? Two more transistors down here, unfortunately down by the heatsink. Probably the easiest best here. thing to do is to take off the heatsink. You can see there's a large lug here which holds the heatsink on. Let's get it again. Find it again. Yeah, it's here somewhere. It's this one. Yeah, it's out. And this is the other one, I think. Yeah. These heatsinks I don't tend to bother to keep. I mean, you could if you wanted to. But we can now easily get to the transistors. And it's much the same technique again. Pair of pliers. Get grip underneath it. Try to get all three legs if you can. Get a blob of solder on the end of the bit. Okay. Figure out where the legs are. They appear to be here. Heat all three up. And it came out clean. Can we make it 4 out of 4? This one's quite low down to the board, but we can try. Okay, we're in there. Same sort of thing. The transistors here. Blob of solder. Okay. And out it came. Clean, yeah? So that's how to pull transistors out of boards without breaking the transistor. And most of the time you'll be able to do it, yeah? There's one more. Let's make it 5 out of 5, yeah? So we can do it. So, again, along those pliers in. This one is very, very close to the board, so I might not be able to get at it. Yeah, that one's very close to the board. So what I'll do with this one is I'll get the end of the tool under the transistor and lever it out. Now, this is more likely to break the transistor than the other method, but if you can't get in with along those pliers, it's kind of what you want to do. Again, if we get a good blob of solder on it, so it heats all the legs, I think it came out. Yeah, it came out, it's there, yeah, so we have them. Again, it's a matter of not leaving it out, it's just being gentle with it. OptoIsolators are very easy because they have 2 pins on both ends. And again, I tend to use the same thing, one of these. Get under one edge of the OptoIsolator, you can see I'm in there, yeah? And the same, hit the 2 pins at the same time, and that one end should lift up, and then it's easy to get the second end up. This will bend the legs a bit, but it's not going to damage it. Okay? And you can see, yeah, I've lifted it. Same in with the other end, if you're just getting the gap there between the legs and the body. Hit the 2 legs together, and that just fell out. Yeah, that's out. Okay, we're down to now, what do we want? We want these MOSFETs and we want this chip. Okay, so I'll also probably take this capacitor as well. These fail sometimes. These fail and they stop the power supply from running. So if you haven't got them or you haven't got many values, just take these off. You find them on pretty much every ATX type power supply. Again, just hit one end, go to the other end. Yeah, see how easy that came out? Okay. Getting to this is a bit more difficult because the transformer is in the way. You might want to unsolder the transformer, or you might just decide you really don't want the transformer, in which case we'll try and get it off with it still in there. So we'll unbolt the screws. You could try unsoldering the heatsink, or you could try this. So screws it off. Yeah, out. Right. Then we can lean these away. These 2 transistors will probably be bipolar transistors and identical. This will be a MOSFET almost certainly. The MOSFET is loose on the board. Again, we can see where it is. It's 3 pins here in a line. So this should be fairly easy to get out. Okay. Just some solder on it. get hold of the actual body in your fingers, and then if you slide the thing back and forwards to get all three legs desoldered, yeah? See how easy that came out? A little MOSFET, or not so little. These are going to be a little bit fiddly to get at because of the heatsink. So what I'll probably try to do here is remove this one with a heatsink attached to it, and then we'll come back to that one. To do that, there's one support here on the heatsink and one near the transistor. Okay, so this is a bit harder to do, but let's try it. So that's one of the supports for the heatsink. These three are one of the transistors, yeah? And then the other support is right at the other end here, which is, in fact, on this it's two supports. Easiest way to do this probably is to use a bit of solder braid to get the end of the heatsink loose. So we can bit of braid. You may want a bit of flux to do this, depends how good your braid is. This Chemtronics is really good stuff and you often don't need any flux. So I've unsoldered one. I've unsoldered the other. You can use a vacuum tool or something like that, of course, to do it with. Okay, that's loosened that end of the heatsink, and then the other support on the heatsink is here. So again, we can effectively desolder support. So that heatsink now should be basically loose. Yeah, you can see the legs waggling around. I open the holes where I've unsoldered them. So that's loose. So now, if we just heat up this one transistor, and the other one's unbolted from it, so that'll stay in the board. Heat up this one transistor, this should come out. Yeah, okay. So that's effectively how to do those. This one has another one of these little micro washers behind it, worth having. Okay, worth having. Transistor. So all that's left on this board that I want is the IC. Now, the best way to do this is with hot air, without a doubt. Hot air is the way to do it. Oh, let's take the other transistor out as well. So we'll have the other one. This should be easy, get hold of it. A little bit of leaded solder on all three pins, and it should just come out the board. Okay, a bit of leaded solder in there. In fact, I think you probably saw it actually almost fell out the board. In fact, it did fall out the board. Okay, that's very obliging. It just fell out of the board for us. The last thing we're going to remove is a chip. I'm going to do this with hot air. It's the easiest way to do it. The best way probably is to hit it from behind and try to slide something like this underneath it, which is like a flat blade type thing, and it should just come off the board without damaging any pins. You might want to remove the nearby electrolytic capacitors first so they don't explode. It's probably worth doing. So that'll come off as well. And while we're at it, this one might as well go. So we'll just remove those. Yeah, there's one left, it might as well go, and then we're not going to have anything going bang on us when we get this hot. Okay. I've added some leaded solder to it. Now, the way to do this is to clamp this onto something. I normally use a vise, so I'll get my bench vise again, we'll do it that way. Okay, I have it set up. I have one more capacitor here, which I'm going to just take off the board. I have my little flat tool, so this is what I'm going to get down behind the chip, okay, to leave it out of the board. And I'm going to heat it up from the other side of the hot air. Hopefully you'll see it from this angle. Okay, so here's the hot air, set to 450 as I normally do. and we'll just warm the other side of the board, and hopefully you'll see what happens from this side. Just put the camera there. And this should come out nice and clean. It might fall on the floor, but yeah, one end's loose already. It's kind of like falling out of the board now. It's basically, yeah, you can see it falling off the board. So if I just get hold of my pliers or something to get hold of it with, yeah, it's there, yeah? Can you see, where am I? Okay, it's there. So we'll let that cool down. And I'm sure you saw just how easily that came out of the board. And there we have it. Came out very nicely. Look how clean that is. Yeah, look how clean that is. Even the legs are still straight, basically. So that's how to unsolder ICs. Certainly from single-sided boards, but from double-sided boards it works pretty well. Or even, you know, boards with internal layers. That technique works pretty well. As long as you can get enough heat into the board to melt the solder through, they'll literally just come out, yeah, like that did. So we have one of those. We go down a box of bits. Now, the only thing I haven't taken off, just mentioned, these high voltage capacitors. I always keep just a handful of these in, so these can come off. We go back to just using the soldering iron to get these. So again, just literally melt one leg. Yes, you go quick. I just pushed on the edge of it. Other one, yeah, just twisting round slightly. There you go. There you go. Okay, so they came off nice and clean as well. That's everything off that board. I think I've probably shown you most of the techniques I can think of, but I'll have a look at the other ones and let's see if there's anything else I can show you. Here's a little PCB. It has like a heatsink effectively fastened to the board or bonded to the board, so this could be interesting to get stuff off. I mean, mostly on this I'd like the fuse. Fuse is always worth having. It's quite a chunky inductor here. Sometimes I take the larger of the surface mount capacitors as well, the ones physically larger sizes. I probably will on this because they, you know, not so easy to come by. You can buy them, but I tend to get the smaller ones in stock. There's lots and lots of MOSFETs on here. So although this has the heatsink on the back, this will probably unsolder quite well using hot air. So let's have a go and see how easy it is to dismantle this one. I've pushed on top of the metal tray. I'm not going to put any flux on it. This is kind of what sorts out the men from the boys when it comes to hot air stations, because the chances are you need to get quite a lot of heat into this to desolder these things. I'll start off doing it right-handed and picking up with the left hand. I might swap over, but I think it'll come out on video better this way. So first of all, let's see if we can get any of these MOSFETs to desolder. We're not going to do anything until it warms up, and having the heatsink on the back could make this look a bit tricky. I think if we get it hot enough, once one thing comes off, they'll all start to come off. Let's have a go. Some interesting looking devices on this, which I'm quite like to have. We'll start off, I think, on one corner. Now I've waggled around, I've got the whole thing a bit warm. And let's see if we can get any of these things to come off. At the moment, nothing's happening. Okay, it's now starting to desolder. I say once you get the thing warm, will start coming off very easily. And I think you'll find you can literally strip everything off this board. Yeah. We'll have these big capacitors. Yeah. Once you get used to it, surface mount is probably easier to work on actually than through hole. You see them coming off. I don't know what these MOSFETs are, but they look nice. You see the whole thing's hot now. The whole thing's so hot, I can literally just start pulling things off the board. Yeah. So this shows you just how quick it is to dismantle things like this. It's almost therapeutic, this is. It's so easy to do. Little transistors. Some of these little transistors could also be diodes. This SO23 type package with the 3 pins, you often find single or double diodes in them in various combinations. And like this little, what could be a regulator up in the corner. Okay, and then maybe we'll get these big inductors off as well. I'm not sure how useful these are though, but we might get them off. Yeah. And this is in real time. I'm thinking like now in like 4 minutes, if you've effectively got a completely stripped board, flick it over. I just want the fuse I mentioned. Yeah, the large capacitors will have. And this inductor will have. Capacitor will probably just come off anyway. A little bit of gold on this, of course. I'm not going into gold reclamation at the moment. But we can have this nice chunky inductor. There you go, guys. That's how easy that was. What else have we got in this box of boards to salvage? We have this little power supply. This is off a Humax, probably a satellite receiver. 82 to 50 volt input. Little figure of 8 or IEC type connector on it. And this one is marked as 12 volts 2.5 amps output. Now with something like this, I would either keep the whole thing because it's not particularly big, and I keep a few power supplies like this if they're a useful voltage. I mean 12 volts 2.5 amps is quite a useful power supply. I'm sure this can go into some sort of project at some point, and I would be tempted to keep it. Depending on how much space you have, I guess, for storing this stuff. If you weren't going to keep it, much like the other ones, the MOSFETs worth having, the little controller chip, the big capacitor, definitely take the power connector. And this fuse, these are useful to take these type of fuses. This is a thermistor, I would say. Yeah, probably. And another one here. This one's a thermistor. This may be something different, but those I would have. This actually looks like it might be a voltage dependent resistor. So this is wired directly across the mains. Yep, this is directly across the mains, and this is a voltage dependent resistor. So the idea with these, if you put too much voltage in it, effectively goes short. They tend to explode or go bang. And it's a protection device basically. But these things fail sometimes, so it's worth having those. Inductor worth having again, probably. That'll be the TL431. So it's down to you with something like this. Bridge rectifier we should have as well. But in this case, I'm going to keep it because it's a useful little power supply. Easy to fit into a little case with the projects. And if it's working, that's mine, yeah? What else we got? Little board came off something. Just 4 diodes. One's a bridge rectifier with a 35 volt 1000 mic capacitor. Again, I'll probably just keep that as it is. Useful little thing when you're working on some sort of project, so that we can keep. This came from some sort of lighting effect with lots of halogen bulbs in it. I seem to remember that this was actually faulty and that the MOSFETs, which were effectively fitted on here, either side, are actually faulty. So we can have a quick look actually, just see if these are good or not. If they're not good, then obviously they can go in the bin. But the heatsinks are useful, so heatsinks I always keep. Yeah, short circuit. The chances are with something like this, if I find one that's short circuit, I probably wouldn't trust any of them, even if they read okay. You see, I've got a good one there, but whether I would trust it, I really am not sure. Game reads okay. I mean, it reads okay, I'll give it that. So look at the ones on the other heatsink. So that was a short again, so there's two short. I bet this one's okay. It's like they failed on one side and not the other side. Yeah, that's short as well. 3 out of 4 are short, and I honestly wouldn't trust the other one as far as I could throw it into the bin. So I think we'll just get rid of those. What I would take from this, the large capacitors. Strangely enough, little connectors like this are very useful. This is some sort of is it a fuse or just marked as CX TSM, not really sure what it is. Could be a fuse. And we have some bridge rectifiers on the little board again. So I'll probably just take them off, just quickly check them, take the large capacitors off this, and the other stuff I wouldn't bother with. If there's a little controller on here, I would tend to not bother, because the chances are if the transistors were short, that's no good either. I think I have everything I want from this one. These I think are actually 0 ohm resistors, just as J1 and J2, just wire links basically. There's a few small diodes on here, but I mean, you know, if you wanted them, you could have them. So what did I have from this board? Well, I've got the heat sinks, definitely useful. Nice pair of them, even got the mounting screw with that one. And there's a mounting hole on that, so they're quite nice. A few capacitors. This is quite nice, these are worth having. So this is like a 0.2 ohm 5 watt resistor. And just a little board full of diodes. Now they look like they're wired in parallel, they are. So you've got in parallel, and they're wired as a bridge rectifier. You can see where the input is and where the output is. And then across the output is this, which I think is a Zener diode or something like that. Avalanche diode or something maybe. So that's what I have from it. This thing reads effectively like short near enough, 0.4 ohm by my meter. I was just reading that because of the resistance of the leads. I think it might be a fuse. One of the things that did come off that was this little component, ST25C 945P. Now I think I've seen one of these before. If we look at the analyzer, it's not a transistor. This tells me that it's actually a faulty or unknown component. I've looked for a data sheet for this and I'm not sure what it actually is, but I'm pretty sure it isn't a transistor. So there we go. Just unknown or faulty components. It comes up on some sites for hard to find components. I'm very strongly suspect I have seen one before, but anyway, that's it. So we'll keep hold of that, and if any of you guys want to tell me what that is, I'd be interested to know. Actually, I have a few old boards off hard drives here. Again, you can keep these if you want, if they're just off, you know, faulty drives basically, but you think the controller's okay. These are probably quite old ones from low capacity drives, probably not worth keeping, but there are some bits on here I would take. So these are the motor controller chips. There's one there. That might well be the one on that one. That I'm pretty sure will be the motor controller on this one. So I'll probably take them. I've seen these fail. Worth having. BIOS chips. Now, this one I don't particularly see one. This one, it may have already been removed. Yeah, it looks like there was some soldering done around these there. So that's already been removed. This is possibly one of the chips, is probably the BIOS. So the 8-pin chips that have the inductors and these chunky type components you see here, and the chunky capacitors, yeah, those I definitely take. These chunky things are often avalanche diodes and similar devices which do go short circuit, and in my opinion are worth having. So I'll take the few bits I want off them. The RAM chips and the if you like the controller chips, I probably won't bother, to be quite honest. If you need them, plenty of low value resistors on here. Depends on what you keep in your stash already, actually. So I'll certainly take these chunky capacitors and things off here, which is the same way as I did on that previous board, where I pretty much dismantled it with hot air. And there we have it. Some inductors, including some very tiny ones. Transistor or MOSFET of some sort, some chunky capacitors. These are probably avalanche diodes or diodes. We have some chips. So again, we can just put them into the various little tubs for sorting later. So that just took a couple of minutes, and all those 3 boards are stripped for the useful bits, basically. This board, I think, is off an old DVD player or something like that. It says DVD M on there, and it says Pioneer on it somewhere. Personally, I would say with boards like this, yeah, Pioneer, are probably not really worth salvaging parts from. In particular, these electrolytic capacitors, they're not easy to remove, and if you try to remove these with hot air, it's quite often they will just explode. So generally speaking, this type of electrolytic surface mount are not worth salvaging. But if you do want to have them, and you've got the bit of patience, you can do it with a soldering iron. So we just get a good blob of solder on one end and try to get some solder onto the actual leg, the pin, yeah. And it takes a bit of heat to do this. Bit of solder on there, bit of solder on the other side. Okay. And then you can effectively like lever it across. You can do sometimes do it just with your finger, especially if you've got fingernails. So you can effectively come in with a soldering iron and then push the capacitor across, yeah, a little bit like that. If you can't get under it easily, something like this will do the job as well. So just a flat blade under between the PCB and the little plastic thing that sits underneath it. Now I've got it to lift up slightly. Heat the joint, you see, and tip it back, yeah. Once you've got one side, the other side is usually pretty easy to get, so we can just usually grab hold of it and take it off, yeah. So if you do want to salvage these capacitors, that is the way to do it without damaging. I know you can kind of rip them off with pliers and a number of other techniques, but that is if you actually want to take off faulty ones and replace them. If you want to salvage any of these, this is the way to do it. But generally, I don't really bother with them. Again, we can come in on this one. We can try and hit the pin. Yeah, so if I can tip it up a little bit. Once you get to move a little bit, you can do as I did before. You can get under the edge of it with something like this flat blade type soldering aid. Yeah, and there it goes, yeah. Tip it back. Take a little bit of solder. Okay. On the other end, and I should be able to lift this off the board. Yeah, there you go. So that's how you salvage this type of capacitor if you want to take them off the board. The only other things on here, these are generally kind of like dedicated chips, and unless you just want to build a large collection of chips, chances are you'll never use them. A few things on here like this one, 74HC, so that's a 74 series logic chip. I mean, that's something you might be able to use. We can get that one off, and something on the other side. This is double-sided. Yeah, there's another 7.4 series there. So if you want to take them, take these off. They may have some use to you. Quite a chunky MOSFET here. But again, I'd remove the capacitor before we do that. These are motor controller or amplifier chips, often motor controllers. You might want them. It might be of some use for some sort of project. So maybe those two, that, and any 7.4 series I can see on here I will take off. The rest I probably won't bother with, to be quite honest. I know there's an ADC there. It all depends on what sort of stuff you're interested in, really. But generally, there's probably not a lot of parts on this board I actually want to salvage. So I removed enough capacitors so I could get to the chips I actually wanted. And then just remove the motor controllers, as I say, the 7.4 series chips. And that's about it, really. So this is what we have, a couple of motor controller chips. Could be interesting for some project or other. A couple of MOSFETs, a rather unusual looking one. These are 7.4 series. This is the analog to digital converter ADC. May or may not be useful, but it was free, yeah. And then sometimes I'll take off unusual things. This looks like some sort of variable resistor or capacitor, possibly capacitor. It only has 2 connections on it. I can't say I've seen one of those before. And look at this, like a sandwiched capacitor. It could be a ceramic resonator, a bit like a crystal, basically. Not sure, but I just can't resist seeing. If I see things like that, I have to have them, yeah, just because they're like strange. So that's what we got off that board. And lastly, I have a few old T-Con boards. I don't fix TVs, so I'm not interested in these. They'll probably have EEPROMs on them, maybe, so any of the chips like this I'll take. MOSFETs, inductors, and again, some of the capacitors, if they're particularly large surface mount ones, nice chunky ones, then I'll have those. So yeah, this is just a bit of useful stuff. These connectors might be worth having, so you'll probably find connectors like these on all sorts of things. Whether we can unsolder them without melting them is another matter. But let's have a go and let's see if we can actually get any of these connectors off these boards. I'll start off by kind of unsoldering the other stuff because this will give the board a good warm. So we'll go with the MOSFETs, inductors on this one. These are probably diodes, so we'll have that as well. And then with a bit of warmth then, we might be able to remove these. It might be that you want to use a preheater, but hey, let's give it a go, just for the fun of it, yeah, because this is all about desoldering techniques as well as salvaging stuff. Yeah, so these are coming off. That might be an EEPROM. I haven't looked at it. It's off. Another good sized MOSFET. Off. Another chip could be an EEPROM or something. We can take it off. Inductors and probably diodes. Sometimes you get tantalum capacitors, but I think these are diodes. Especially because they're near to the inductors. Inductors come off quite easily. Yeah. None of these are particularly large capacitors, I'm not too bothered about them. Let's see if we can actually desolder without using a preheater these connectors, without melting them. So I'll try and get the heat in along the edge where the PCB is rather than directly down on it. Well, let's see if it'll come off. Nothing happening yet. Still nothing happening. And it's starting to melt on the one on the end of it, yeah. Just starting to go on that end. So for this I'm sure you would need a preheater. Coming. Well, actually, it's off. We'll have a look at it in a minute. Let's try the other one. Same sort of technique, get the board warm behind it. If it will slide off. Yes, it's sliding. Okay. So here are our connectors. This is the first one I removed. Just slightly melted on that corner. In fact, probably the two on both of them actually. But let's see if they actually work. Yeah, they work. They appear to work. So might be useful just having a few of these things. Connectors are always useful, and they certainly came off in one piece, and I'd be fairly confident about refitting them, especially using the preheater, which would have been easier. Yeah. Other than that, we have a few MOSFETs, a couple of chips, diodes, inductors, and I can do the same with the other ones. So I'll just get the bits off these on ones. These do have some nice big capacitors, so I will take them off these ones. And then I think we've done with the salvaging parts for now. This one also has quite an interesting looking connector, so let's see on video if I can do the same with this one as well. There's nothing underneath it. I might actually have a use for these boards. We'll play with them later. So again, let's try to remove the large capacitors and coils, and then we'll kind of come back in towards this connector and see if we can actually get it off the board in one piece. Same with these. Just get the whole area warm. Once it starts desoldering, everything will come off very easily. Yeah, we're getting there now. I'll use my right hand because I'm much better with the right hand for picking things up. Should be able to get the MOSFET quite easily now. Okay. And this is a great way to practice when you're first using hot air. And you'll get some useful bits as well, most likely. Again, you see the inductor, just heat it off it comes very easily. Chunky capacitor. Let's have this chip. Yeah. And now I'm getting close to these connectors again. Let's see if we can do the same trick. We'll take these capacitors off. Obviously the back of this board is now very warm because the capacitors are just lifting off, and let's see if we can slide this off the board again. This time in the direction of me. I'll try to hold this so you can actually see. Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, let's go for this metal if you want to. Same sort of method. Just move the board a little bit. This is a bit easier with the air blowing away from me. Again, we can have these chunky looking components. Obviously this area is very warm now, everything's just lifting off cleanly. Let's try this connector. Same technique, hitting behind it, and we'll try and slide it off the board. Yep, slid straight off. There we have it. A few inductors, MOSFETs or similar, a few ICs, nice little selection of chunky SMD capacitors, a few diodes, and these connectors, and they came off very successfully actually. So, you know, even this one, the metal type one, hasn't melted, it's fine. So I just have a few more similar boards. I'm going to strip some parts off, and then I'll do that off video, and then let's see what we've got. And that's it, guys. So a few more capacitors. I only removed the ones that I needed to remove to get to other components. That's quite a large one. Inductor coils again. Possibly some EPROMs here. I haven't actually checked the part number. These little ones are buck controllers, basically. Some diodes, a couple of MOSFETs. Nice little dual colour LED of some sort. Fuse, always worth having fuses. And then just a handful of various connectors, USB 3 and so on. This came off and took some PCB tracks with it. It's the HDMI, but probably if I just clean it up, the connector itself is probably, well, a little bit of fresh solder would probably help that actually. Let's just get a little bit of solder. A bit of fresh solder. Now let's see if we can just remove these bits of PCB track. Yeah, not easily. I think the pins are okay though, just looking at it. So yeah, we can probably get something useful like this. Bit of flux there, try a bit of flux. See if it wants to come off now. It looks like there's a bit of corrosion on here. I mean, that might even been what was actually wrong with this. Some sort of old Android box PCB or something like that. Well, I've cleaned the stuff off it, yeah, and I think it looks good now, actually. So we can call that a good HDMI connector. Power connectors, quite useful. A couple of those. So that's what we have. So the main thing now is how we organise stuff, because there's not a lot of point in salvaging these bits if you can't find them when you need them, yeah? This is basically ICs that I took. A lot of the little ones will probably be little buck controllers I mentioned. So we have those. We have quite a few inductors on that lot. And you can see they kind of organised already. So this is the various capacitors I took off. A whole load of connectors, yeah, useful stuff in here without a doubt. This is diodes, the diode matrices we took off, and also some MOSFETs or similar devices, possibly voltage regulators, so we have those there. This is the odds and ends, so the high wattage resistors, the little NTC, the low value one, the little micro or rather rubbery insulated washers. I found the second one of these little adjustable things on that DVD board, so we had that. And there's also some fuses in here as well, the LED, so that's a few odds and ends. And then this one is all the surface mount transistors. Some might be little double diodes and MOSFETs, and these are the little probably diodes that I took off. So I've kind of got it somewhat organised, but even so, that's not a lot of use unless we sort it out properly, yeah? It's much easier to do this on my mobile phone. So this is how I organise my stuff. I mean, obviously we've all got our own ways of doing it, and they're in probably the order they are just because it's easy to fit on the shelves that way. So here you can see diodes, diode matrix, bridge rectifier, Schottky, and then all the Zener diodes and the various values. I think one, yeah, that's just all 4 1 watt Zeners, switches, knobs, heat sinks, batteries, yeah. And then same with this one, there's pretty much all connectors. You can see all the different sorts of connectors. Some just say various connectors and so on. Cable tidies and those, relays. So that's how I'm doing it. Fuses. Kind of organised like that, yeah. Jack plug sockets, phono plug sockets, or RCA, if you call them that. Speak-on connectors, yeah, HDMI. So that's how I'm doing it. And then I have, that one's obviously fell off, but I have, these are all through-hole resistors. So each one just has 4 values in, if you like, yeah, and they marked on the front what's in them. So that's how that's done. And then after the normal resistors, you have the wire ones just in various values. Resistor matrices in there. See thermistors, VDRs. So that's how I'm basically doing it. Some inductors in that one. It says inductors. Presets, potentiometers. Again, like 4 values per tray, so it doesn't take too much storage. Large potentiometers. And these are all salvage for the main part. Sliders. Capacitors in that one. This is just cables, test leads. Then we have through-hole capacitors again. A lot of this is salvage stuff. If I just get in one, you can see some are new bits, some are salvage bits. But again, they're kind of an order of value, yeah. So they just get larger and larger into the electrolytics, high voltage capacitors in that one, and so on, yeah. And then in the bottom we have the ones I tend to buy. So these are like motherboard type capacitors and power supply type capacitors. Look at overflow to there, just as it did. So that's what we have. These bottom ones I just keep test equipment. So that's how we do that. Then surface mount capacitors and the various values and the different sizes. 0603, yeah, resistors 0603. 0805, and again each one will have just little bags of components, all the different values in order, yeah, so you can just see how they are. So that's what we have there. I think we have some 0603 capacitors, yeah. This one's all transistors, and you can just see how I arrange them. So I'm going for like ranges of numbers, and then in each one you will find a few bags with different ones in, kind of in order. So if you find one more full here, yeah, so that's how they are, yeah. And then they're in bags. So the idea of this, I can find stuff, yeah, I can find stuff. MOSFETs are just here, just as MOSFETs. Now I need to rearrange these. I haven't got the space for them in here, so I have another storage drawer, this one here, which is going to get all the through-hole MOSFETs. So when I sort them out, back to this one, MOSFETs, triacs, dual MOSFETs, voltage regulators, yeah, so all kind of like similar things you'd expect to put together. Heat shrink, LED strips, IC sockets, and again all the bottom drawers are full of like cables and test leads. So that's that lot. Down here I keep the through-hole diodes mainly. You can see they're kind of in order of the different ratings. So they're not like stored on part numbers, they're just stored by different ratings, like, you know, 100 volt 10 amp diodes in there, 6 amp diodes in there, 5 amp diodes in there. But by doing it this way, I can kind of find what I want. Yeah, I can kind of find what I want. I mean, some are stored under the actual component type, but just common ones, if you like. 1M400 will be 1M4148's common one. 4007, yeah. And then LEDs, just sort of like 3mm, 5mm, and then the high wattage, 3 watt, 90 watt, 30 watt, yeah. And under that, basically this is where I keep the through-hole ICs. So you can see they kind of in order, like 27 series, 300 to 399. So that's basically any part number starting from 300 to 399 go in there, yeah. 3000 to 399 and even so on, yeah. So that's how that's sort of done. And once we get to the ones which start with letters, you realise, yeah, everything started from KO to KZ, LO to LK, and so on, yeah. Some get their own little slot, NE555. OptoIsolators just mixed, but they're kind of in there so you can see what you've got. And I find this makes it fairly easy to store stuff, and you can add stuff to it easily. So anything starting with UA just goes in here, and then effectively you have to have a look in the drawer to see if you've got what you want. Yeah, ULN, so on. Down here we have a few more odds and ends, some empty drawers, crystals, rotary encoders, DC to DC converters, banana plugs, coaxial power fuses. So this is various fuses. These are all 20mm, and they're kind of in order of the actual value, yeah, so each one's in a little bag so you can find them. So that's how I do all the through-hole stuff. These are some plastic tubs. They all stack together to form one, basically. But this is where I keep the larger SMD capacitors. So like all the 0805s are in here. And you can see if we just take one out, 4.7 nanofarad 0805. Next one will be 10 nanofarad and so on. So they're in order of value. And then after that I've got the 1206, which is the next size up. Again, they're in the values in there. These are some large SMD resistors. The values are printed on there. Again, capacitors. These are inductor beads actually. This is where I keep the polymer type capacitors and the surface mount ones. So these are kind of all in one place. You have to have a look to see what you want in that lot. And then this last tub, this is where I keep all the inductor beads. So here, for example, I will have a whole range of different values, which I would have bought off AliExpress. These are little colour-coded ones, all the different values. And that's where I keep these. So, looking at these new inductors, I mean, that'll probably just go in a thing of its own. And all the rest will just go in the tub there. So at the moment I don't bother to sort the inductors. I just have a look through to see if I've got ones I want when I want one. So that's how I'm organising that lot. And then, as I say, this lot will sort of stash together. Yeah, a lot of these are all like one value in one bag, makes it easy. So that's how I organise that lot. And then the last thing really is the SMD transistors and ICs. Okay, and this is how I keep the surface mount ICs. So I'll zoom down, you can see it a little bit better. This side are all ICs, basically integrated circuits. They're kind of an alphanumeric order, and each one will have the part number just written on it, so it's nothing very high tech. Yeah, you can see them in there. So they're in there. These few in here will be ones that are to be added to the stock, but I'll explain why these are here in a minute, why they're not in there yet. This side is basically all surface mount transistors and MOSFETs in here. If I just take one out, you can see part numbers on them, yeah. So they're all effectively written with part numbers on them. Okay? Yeah. And that's it really. I actually keep some processors in this side, CPUs. So that's how I do that. The reason I have these here waiting to go in is because with the surface mount ICs and the through-hole ICs in particular, I keep a spreadsheet. So I have an Excel, it's very basic, but you'll have chips like this one, which the marking is 7J and an equal sign. So that is a rich tech marking basically. And this is the part number. So how do you file them if they have double numbers like that? So what I do is I'll file them under this number, yeah, and I'll add this to the spreadsheet in the second column. Good example, if you have say 4000 series IC like 4093, 4092, but you might have them with letters in front of them like this. So this is HFC 4053 and it's filed as HCF, yeah, HCF. But you might just have some that say 4092 on them, or you might have other prefixes like CD 4093. So what I do is I put them on the spreadsheet, and then if I want to find a 4093, I can have a quick look, just search for 4093, and I'll look through the spreadsheet, and it'll tell me I've got something filed as HCF 4093. Yeah. If I didn't do that, it would be very difficult to find things. So that's how I actually do it. Think of what you will. I think it's probably the best way to do it, because like this, I can just add more and more to it, yeah, without having to effectively shuffle things around. I just slide them in here. So there you go, some voltage regulators as well. Okay, so that's how I organise the ICs and MOSFETs. So there you go, guys. We had a few different techniques for desoldering different types of components, both through-hole and surface mount. I've maybe given you some idea how to organise your components so you can actually find stuff when you want it, because there's no point in having a large stock of new and salvage components if you can't find them. Yeah, it's pointless, absolutely pointless. The time it takes to keep it organised is well worth spending, and if you do it as you go along rather than letting it all get into a big mess, you can just spend a little bit of time every now and then just adding more components to the stock. It's not difficult. I have, from that box of boards you notice I started off with, I still have some motherboards in there. I haven't salvaged parts off those yet because I thought those would be a very good thing to use. They are scrap boards, and we can use them to explore some different soldering and desoldering techniques, not for salvaging but for repair work. So we'll keep those for that, and we can look at different methods of soldering, unsoldering, rework. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed that one. I hope I managed to cut it down to a reasonable length, but I probably didn't because I'm recording this before I finished. Yeah, and I'll see you all soon on another Learning Electronics repair video. Ciao for now, guys.